Good morning, everyone. Welcome to World Habitat Day 2021. What a wonderful day it is. We are all gathered here this morning to have our own celebrations here in Jamaica. I would like to take the time out to especially welcome a few persons who are on the platform. My name is Doreen Prendergast, and I'm your moderator for the program today. I would like to welcome the Honorable Colonel Charles Jr., our Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change. I would also like to welcome our Permanent Secretary, Dr. Alwyn Hales, and Ms. Denise Antonio, the resident representative of the United Nations Development Program for Jamaica, Belize, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Bahamas, and Turks and Caicos Islands. I would also like to welcome Professor Dale Weber, Pro Vice Chancellor and Campus Principal of the University of the West Indies, Mona, as well as he's also the Chairman of the Climate Change Advisory Board. I noticed online that I think I see our Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Transport, Works and Housing, Dr. Janine Dawkins, and I see some other persons from our Transport Ministry and other ministries on board. Climate change is a very important aspect of what we are doing, and I note that there are some persons here representing the climate change aspect of the ministry's work as well. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. World Habitat Day is a United Nations initiative, and it is aimed at promoting basic rights for adequate shelter and housing for all, not some, for all. Now we know that due to population density and rapid urbanization, our urban spaces in particular have been significantly impacted, and not in a very good way in many instances, but in many ways, the effects have been really bad for our environment and for us as human beings living in these spaces. Now, World Habitat Day is being celebrated around the theme, accelerating urban action for a climate-free world. And it is encouraging countries to come up with your own solutions, finding your own solutions to your habitat problems. And I must say, as I mentioned earlier, we have so many challenges in our urban spaces. There are density issues, there's the issue of urban sprawl, there is poverty, natural disasters, climate impact issues as well, crime and insecurity issues, just to name a few, and of course, a myriad of infrastructure issues. So today, it is our intention that we will have this program, and coming from our discussions, we will identify a series of solutions, possible solutions that can be adopted in addressing our urban spaces, particularly around the theme, accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. As many persons are aware, approximately 70% of our global carbon dioxide emissions are attributable to our urban spaces as a result of the rise in greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a lot of work to do, and it is our intention that this platform today, this activity today, will help to guide us as to some of the actions and some of the decisions that we can take. Having said that, and having utilized my time as chairman just to sort of give you an overview of what we are about today, I'm now going to invite Ms. Paula Parks, Senior Director, Housing Policy Research and Monitoring, to bring us prayer.
At this time, we'll ask Ms. Parks to unmute herself.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, CTV Prendergast. Let us pray. Almighty God, as we come together to give you thanks for this new day and another opportunity for us to come together and work together for a common cause, we just want to say, we just really want to give you thanks. Today we are recognizing World Habitat Day. And we are aware, Lord, that the quality of our environment is important to our social well-being, and the economic development of our country and the world at large. In so doing, as we deliberate on this year's theme, accelerating urban action towards a carbon-free world, we ask for your wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and good success in achieving the outcomes that we desire. We also, Lord, recognize that we are in challenging time, particularly as we go through this pandemic. And we thank you, Lord God, for your protection and ask for your continued blessing on us and our families, friends, and colleagues, Lord God, as we work together in achieving the goals and our necessary portfolio areas towards the benefit of Jamaica and the world at large. We thank you again for this event, and we pray that you just continue to be with us and cause, Lord God, that each of us here, when we would have come to the end of it, would say that it was great for us to be here when we move forward, Lord God, in enhancing everything that we need to do to improve our environment. We give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Parks. Now we're going to move straight into welcoming our permanent secretary, Dr. Alwyn Ayles, and asking him to bring remarks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Prendergast, our moderator for this morning, Honorable Colonel Charles, Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change, Ms. Denise Antonio, Resident Rep of the United Nations Development Program, Professor Dale Weber of the University of the West Indies, other distinguished guests, members of the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change, other participating ministries, Ministry of Transport and Mining. Let me welcome you all to this event, World Habitat Day, hosted by the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, and Climate Change. Our theme for this year is activity, accelerating urban action towards a climate-free world. I think we're all aware that our cities are the growth engines of the national economy and the centers of industrial, commercial, and cultural activities. As such, they continue to be beacons of hope for large numbers of persons, particularly from our rural areas, seeking better opportunities and a better standard of living for themselves and their families. However, with seemingly no end in sight to the rural-urban drift, our cities are under tremendous strain, with housing stock, facilities, infrastructure, and services struggling to keep pace with rapid urbanization. The consequence include a high level of urban decay characterized by rundown or poorly constructed dwellings, high building density, increases in the incidence of squatting, all of which impact our environment and contribute to the factors that give rise to climate change. The ministry has therefore placed a comprehensive program of sustainable urban renewal on the front burner. In doing so, we are moving to incorporate the use of energy efficient technologies and environmentally friendly methods in our planning and development process in order to reduce pollution as well as our carbon footprint. As we observe World Habitat Day, I urge that all of us work towards our goal of building sustainable, healthy, vibrant, and harmonious urban areas, where everyone, regardless of their background and socioeconomic status, can enjoy a decent living. Indeed, our Vision 2030, in our Vision 2030, we seek to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise family, and do business. And that is what Habitat all about. So we want to make Jamaica the choice habitat, because our habitat is really where we live, where we work, where we raise family and do business. Once again, a warm welcome to everyone, both here and with us virtually. And I do hope you fully appreciate what we have to offer for World Habitat Day. And I look forward to the presentations and discussions. Welcome all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alwyn Ailes, our Permanent Secretary, for your warm welcome and for pointing to the fact that the ministry itself is taking steps to make our communities more livable. You spoke about us being involved in energy efficient methodologies, as well as adopting environmentally sound techniques in our programs and policies, and that is quite commendable. And of course, we note your call for us to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, do business, and raise families. So thank you very much, Dr. Ailes. Now it is my pleasure at this point in our program to welcome Professor Dale Weber to bring remarks. But before he does, I would like to introduce Professor Dale Weber in a more extensive way. Professor Dale Weber was appointed to the position of Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal of Mona Campus at the University of the West Indies with effect from August 1, 2018, having served as Pro Vice Chancellor for Graduate Studies and Research between August 1, 2015 and July 31, 2018. Professor Weber has had a distinguished career in coastal ecology and environmental management, and a strong and consistent record of teaching, graduate supervision, administration, and research, which spans approximately 30 years. Professor Weber also has an excellent record of public service, serving as chairman of the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica, the board of directors, serving as chairman of the board of directors of the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica. He was also a convener of the Cape Environmental Sciences Panel for the Caribbean Examination Council, chairman of CL Environmental Company, and chairman of Jamaica's Climate Change Advisory Board. And this morning he's here in his capacity as chairman of the Climate Change Advisory Board. He's as an academic and a researcher, Professor Weber has produced 7 book chapters and 35 publications in peer-reviewed journals. He has also presented his research and findings at conferences locally, regionally, and internationally. And he has written over 20 technical reports for the government of the Caribbean. And he has also brought in a lot of dough with that. He has attracted approximately US 2.5 million in research grants. He has supervised students at the MSc, the MPhil, and the PhD level. Professor Dale is married to a very beautiful woman. He is married to Professor Mona Weber, who is a marine ecologist at the University of the West Indies. And they have 2 daughters, Marissa and Diana. Let us all welcome Professor Dale Weber as he brings his remarks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Prendergast, moderator. Honorable Colonel Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change. Dr. Alwyn Ailes, Permanent Secretary, MUREC. Ms. Denise Antonio, Country Representative, United Nations Development Program. Ms. Paula Parks from MUREC. Ms. Sharon Sampson. My friend Brian Richardson and Anthony Mckenzie, who I see will be taking active roles in a few moments. Members of the media, members from other government agencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. Climate change is without doubt the most prominent global threat facing us. And some may say COVID is trying to marry with it. As a small island developing state, we are acutely aware of the importance of effective climate adaptation strategies to combat the numerous threats of climate change. This year's World Habitat Day theme of accelerating urban action towards a carbon-free world is an urgent call for action to mitigate climate change by transforming urban centers into carbon-neutral areas. At the heart of sustainable urbanization is reducing emissions and increasing efforts to reclaim and sustain the natural environment while protecting the rights of citizens, especially the most vulnerable who need habitat. That is how we will fully realize Sustainable Development Goal 11 of making citizens and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. That is how we will meet the ambitious targets to which we have committed in our updated NDC Partnership Plan. That is how we will realize Vision 2030 Jamaica. Over the past decades, we have seen the impact of urban-rural migration. We have not always adequately managed the pressure on the natural environment and the physical infrastructure, which results from this urban-rural drift. With 56% of our population living in urban areas, the demands on the physical infrastructure, the social services, etc., they are great. We have to manage those demands better if we are to withstand the impacts of climate change and limit our contributions to global carbon emissions. Globally, the current atmospheric temperature stands at about 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels, according to the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. That is only 0.4 degrees below the Caribbean endorsed 1.5 to stay alive. However, even if we manage to limit atmospheric temperature increase to 1.5 degrees globally, we will still be severely impacted, especially in island states, as our weather and climate change. We're already experiencing more significant numbers of tropical weather systems and more intense, and they happen in greater succession. We have to make a concerted effort to harmonize our actions as government, as a public sector, private sector, educational institution, and especially individuals to transform our urban areas into climate resilient spaces. Climate proofing our urban areas requires greater coordination regarding how we build new structures, how we extend existing ones. LEED certification needs to become more common, more acceptable, and more attainable. Additionally, we must carefully examine the design for structures to see if they're energy efficient. Will they exponentially increase our electricity consumption, most of which is now generated from carbon-rich fossil fuels? We will also have to take a look at how we lay out our urban areas. Are we spreading our essential services so far that they have to use motorized transportation to move from one place to the next? And what is the best way to do this? Currently, electricity production and transportation sector together account for almost 70% of Jamaica's greenhouse gas emissions. We must re-envision how we look at our green cities. It has to go beyond just beautification projects to the point of deliberately making our urban spaces into carbon sinks. We will not entirely eliminate greenhouse gases, so we have to increase our vegetation in urban areas to absorb what it is we're emitting. Essentially, carbon-free urbanization needs a significant reduction in emissions and a concomitant increase in capacity to absorb those emissions in order to get to carbon neutrality. We at the Climate Change Advisory Board are working with public and private sector, as well as all Jamaicans, towards that carbon neutrality goal. Activities include promulgating carbon trading, carbon neutral and carbon reducing policies, initiatives, and island-wide activities. World Habitat Day is an opportunity for all Jamaicans to reflect on what they do to create a sustainable carbon neutral, inclusive city or town. I hope that we will use this year's observance to critically examine where we are, decide where we want to be, and identify what we will need to change to get there. We can and must make the required changes. I know we have the will, I know we have the capacity, we now need to engage. I look forward to today's exercise and hearing from all our experts as we discuss this important topic. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much, Professor Dale Weber, for your very insightful remarks. You point us to the fact that climate change is a threat to our urban spaces. You also talk about the demands that this has caused on our physical infrastructure as well as on our people. You have called us to ensure that we bring people as front and center in our decision making. And of course, you have asked us to re-envision how we look at our cities. Re-envision how we look at our cities with the aim that we can bring about a carbon-free urban spaces through our policies and through our various partnerships. And of course, in closing, you challenge us to critically examine where we are, where we want to be, and how we intend to get there. Thank you very much, Professor Dale Weber. At this point, I will now invite Ms. Denise Antonia, country representative of the United Nations Development Program, to bring her remarks. And of course, I too will also use this time to introduce her formally to you all on the platform. Mrs. Denise Antonio from the United Nations Development Program is the resident representative to Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. She took up her position here in Jamaica, a new assignment in Jamaica on May 16, 2019. Prior to this appointment, Mrs. Antonia was Deputy Country Director for Operations with UNDP in Angola. So she left Angola, that position in Angola, and took up the position subsequently here in Jamaica. She has also served in her official capacity in Zimbabwe from 2011 to 2015, and as Deputy Resident Representative in Ghana in 2006 to 2011. She has also worked in Cote d'Ivoire, and she has carried out work as a peacekeeping accounts officer with the United Nations program in New York from 2000 to 2005. Before joining the United Nations, Mrs. Antonia held various positions of increasing responsibility in the United States. She worked as controller at Screen Vision Cinema Network. She worked as controller at International Herald Tribunal. She worked as a senior internal auditor at the New York Times Company and as an auditor at the New York Life Insurance Company. Mrs. Antonia is a certified public accountant in New York State and a graduate of business administration in accounting from Adelphi University. She is married and is a mother of 5. Let us all welcome Mrs. Denise Antonia to bring her remarks.
Thank you very much, moderator, Ms. Pendergrast. The Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Energy, Environment, and Climate Change. Dr. Alvin Hales, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry. All other government officials present here this morning. Professor Weber, Chairman of the Climate Change Advisory Board. Representatives from the private sector, development partners, the media, other ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. I'm very honored to participate in this panel discussion as we commemorate our World Habitat Day under the theme, Accelerating Urban Action Towards a Carbon-Free World. Global and national trends provide compelling evidence for localized, urgent action towards reducing our carbon footprint in urban spaces. Similar to the world's population, where an estimated 50% live in cities and urban areas, and according to the Jamaica's 2011 census, I think Professor Weber has already alluded to it, 54% of the population in Jamaica reside in urban areas, and they account for 73% of the carbon emission. Like others across the world, many people migrate from the rural areas to the urban areas because they are searching for economic advancement and other opportunities. But with that comes its own set of challenges. And given the trend that we see, urbanization is going to continue to grow exponentially by 2050. So it is therefore very critical that the developmental challenges caused by this nexus between urbanization, environmental degradation, and climate change is addressed with a deliberate action. In pursuit of our global mission in UNDP to end injustice, poverty, inequality, and climate change, we will continue to support Jamaica in addressing this very complex challenge. For example, UNDP recently concluded a global environmental facility funded project to advance low carbon development path and reduce Jamaica's public sector energy bill. And this happened through renewable energy and energy efficiency retrofits that was done in 6 public hospitals. And over a 6-month period from July to December 2020, we can confirm that through that initiative, we saw a reduction of about 30 tons of carbon emission. So we're already seeing this transformation happening in some of the areas we provided support. We are also currently supporting Jamaica's transformation to a large-scale electric vehicle through the JEF-funded $1.7 million sustainable transformation through the Shift to Electric Mobility project. And I think Professor Weber alluded to the fact of the high usage of fuel that Jamaica is dependent on. So UNDP continues to support Jamaica in meeting international reporting commitments, and including last week's event with this ministry as well, where we also, in the 26th pre-COP conference of parties, helped to launch the National Determined Contribution Partnership Plan. So I wish to just assure the government of Jamaica that UNDP remains committed to supporting the government to achieve its 4 national development goals, all of which are aligned to one or more of the targets established under the Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. In furtherance of our continued work in advancing the urban action towards a carbon-free world, as we enter into our new programming cycle, which will begin next year, January 2022 to December 2026, we will focus our energy on climate change and resilience. And specifically, we are committed to upscaling our efforts by supporting the government in strengthening their policy and legislation framework in this key sector, promoting low carbon solution using renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies, and developing nature-based solutions to strengthen local climate change adaptation capacities. This will also include continuing to support Jamaica in meeting their national and international climate change obligations and introduce innovative solutions such as blended financing mechanisms to advance nature-based solutions for climate change mitigation and adaptation at the sectoral and community levels. And we are confident that these and other measures will contribute to Jamaica's carbon footprint, mitigate climate change risk, increase resilience building, and promote sustainable urban development. So I look forward to this very robust discussion that will be held today, and I trust that the ideas shared will be the impetus for accelerating urban action towards a carbon-free world and ensuring that no one is left behind. I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Antonia, for your very insightful remarks. We note that you spoke to the fact that urbanization, that population increase into our urban spaces is fueling urbanization. And you have called us to deliberate action to ensure that our urban spaces are not destroyed, but are sustainable. You spoke to your commitment to assisting us here in Jamaica and meeting our international reporting commitments, and we are truly grateful for that. You also spoke to the fact that you are committed to helping Jamaica to meet its 4 national targets, one of which pertains to sustainable cities and communities. Of course, you highlighted a slew of programs that your organization is currently doing with Jamaica, some focusing on energy, some focusing on strengthening our policies, promoting the use of sustainable energy technology, and of course, strengthening our climate mitigation abilities through, and also promoting the use of blended financing. But what I note most of all is that you mentioned that in all of this, we ought to ensure that no one is left behind. So there is the whole issue of inclusivity that you have spoken about. So once again, we want to thank you for those very, very insightful comments. And at this point in time, we're going to invite, let me just find back my, my agenda. We're now going to invite our very own minister, the Honorable Colonel Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change, to bring us the main address.
Thank you, Mrs. Prendergast, my Chief Technical Director for Housing and Urban Renewal in the ministry. Let me also acknowledge our own Permanent Secretary, Dr. Hales, Ms. Denise Antonia. Thank you for always being involved. You are the resident representative of UNDP, but we have welcomed you and stolen you as our very own. Professor Weber, who is the Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of UWI, also my former lecturer, in whom I'm very proud. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the panel, Ms. Shernette Sampson from Mining and Transport, Mr. Richardson, who's the Manager of Oil and Gas at the Science, Energy and Technology Ministry, Mr. Mckenzie, who is the Director for Environmental Management and Conservation, Mr. Damart Williams, and from the Forestry Department, and of course, our newly minted Senior Director of Urban Renewal and Development in the ministry, Mr. Raymond Poyser. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, everyone, good morning to you. I am very pleased to participate and to welcome everyone again to put in this year's observation of World Habitat Day by the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change. World Habitat Day has been celebrated every year on the first Monday in October since 1985. It was established by the United Nations through Resolution 40-202. And the intention, as you have been advised, is to address the challenges that are attendant to rapid urbanization and the impact that that has on our environment and on human life, particularly human poverty. It also serves as a very important reminder to all of us of our collective responsibility to protect and sustain the future of the human habitat. Now, let's put it in context. Approximately half of the world's population live in urban centers, and this is expected based on the trajectory to increase to 70% by the year 2030. that is a rapid, I would say exponential movement in terms of the impact it can have on our lives. And so as more and more persons, Professor Weber, seek access to work, seek access to educational opportunities, to health facilities, to their preference in terms of infrastructure and other basic services, internet, anything of that nature, we are going to see the growth and increase in the numbers in urban spaces. So, Mrs. Prendergast, that is why this year's theme and the commemoration of World Habitat Day under this theme is so important. Accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. And I know that my senior director, Mr. Poyser, is very excited about this because he is on track to develop the framework now that's going to help this government to advance solutions, particularly for that theme. It is timely and it is fitting. Cities are responsible for some 70% of global carbon dioxide emissions, with transport, building, energy, waste management, all of those accounting for the bulk of the urban greenhouse gas emissions. In Jamaica, the growing size and population of our cities increases the demand that we are seeing for affordable housing. It puts pressure on our environment. You'll see it if you drive around. We see that it impacts our natural resources, and the inadvertent, sometimes the most negative consequence is the increased carbon dioxide emissions that you will see from the traffic and the predominance of heat trapping structures and paved roads, which also add to the increase in the annual mean temperatures. Now, these are things which are important for our life, our operation, but we have to recognize not just the positive, but also the negative consequences of some of the innovation and technology that we use in our daily lives, and see how we can transition to the alternatives. There is no question that the development, Ms. Antonio, of the built environment can provide many benefits to our society. But what is clear is that it cannot take place in a vacuum, and it must not take place at the expense of our natural environment. Finding that judicious balance is difficult, but it is critical. And one of the issues that we have grappled with over the years, and one which places severe stress on the environment, is that of informal settlements. We call it squatting. Squatters who live or capture, as we say, marginal land that is environmentally fragile and unsafe, such as the gully banks and the floodplains, which impacts not just the environment, but also increases and creates great, enormous risk and vulnerability to those who live on these spaces. They typically move into watershed areas, remove the forest cover, causing soil erosion and land slippage. We would have been aware of the incident that occurred, I believe it was last year, when we had some rain and we saw 2 lives lost, a father and a daughter, persons who were informally settled in a very, very risky area on the side of a hill. And we had some rain, landslide, the house was damaged, and we actually lost, they actually lost their life. So we can see the consequences and the impact of the informal settlement on the environment and also on our own existence. I say that to say that we have to take a very targeted approach to address these issues. And it is not something that is isolated to urbanization. There's several related industries, ministries, variables that cause the informal settlements. But from our perspective, the government has to place a priority on initiatives to deal with the informal occupation, and we are placing a priority with regards to treating with and dealing with the informal occupation of land so that we can create vibrant and sustainable communities. Now, this is for us to protect our environment, but to also protect the lives of the citizens that we serve. It's very important. And so my ministry has significantly advanced, and Dr. Hales, the PS, is leading the charge in terms of our preparation of a comprehensive national housing policy and implementation plan. Ms. Parks and CTD, Ms. Scarlett and the team have been working to make sure that we can get this plan to be finalized in short order. The policy is going to provide an enabling framework within which the government will be able to realize its wider goal of access to affordable, safe, and legal housing solutions for all Jamaicans. That seems to be a nice phrase, a nice sentence, but it is something which we have to achieve if we are going to move towards a trajectory of the national development that we seek, and if we're going to do so in a sustained way. So safe, legal, and affordable housing solutions cannot just be a catchphrase. It has to be a target which we understand and a target which we achieve. So cauterizing the practice of informal settlements while making our cities also more resilient. And you will hear, I'm sure you will hear some of the panelists, Mr. Mckenzie for sure will speak about resilience and about the climate proofing and the need for better and more rational use of our land and better planning and greener spaces, and mixing this development that we have where we have so much concrete with green facades so that we can create that balance in terms of the urbanization. And also, very important, something which Jamaica has been speaking about for a long time, and we need to just get to it, is a full assessment of our building codes so that we can have robust building codes and also for us to have smart infrastructure and services. I know that, you know, Mr. Richardson from the Science, Energy and Technology Ministry will certainly agree as it relates to the need for us to infuse innovation that is going to help us to be more efficient and help us to also conserve more. So energy efficiency, water conservation, all of these things are integrated into what we want to see in terms of a better Jamaica. Now, to this end, you know, the ministry is pursuing, we have our national tree planting project, which Mr. Williams can speak about. We have our green economy investment strategy, which identifies opportunities within 5 economic sectors, namely construction, agriculture, tourism, water, and energy. And the strategy recommends measures for us to maximize how we invest and maximize green investments to facilitate now improved energy and resource efficiency, for us to also create sustainable jobs and to increase climate resilience in terms of how we build, in terms of how we operate, and to eliminate the persistent poverty, which is one of the primary drivers of the informal settlements. Last but not least, it's also to prevent the loss of biodiversity and the impact on the ecosystem. So we have a lot of work to do, you know, a lot of work to do. And as I close off, let me just say, my ministry, I always say we have a very long name, but as the name suggests, Ms. Sampson, we have to be the ministry that is interconnecting all of the portfolio areas, not just in our ministry, but across government. And we are aggressively pursuing a program of urban renewal. That's why we have Mr. Poise and we are building out that team And we hope and we are pushing for that program to include now the redevelopment of tenements where amenities and infrastructure will be upgraded, and the tenure of residents will be formalized. We want our citizens to own a piece of our country, so they have the responsibility of taking care of their piece of this rock, and they understand how to do so, and they're facilitated in doing so. And in the process, we are placing emphasis on the development of green spaces. Some of you might have been on the recent call with UDC, where we were going through the visioning session with the members of the Portmore community about the park that will be built there. I know that we are all aware of the need for playing spaces, safe playing fields for our children, for the elderly, for those who want to just exercise, and other open spaces that are critical to be integrated into how we can operate and live in the urban centers. And I know that there's going to also be need for more discussion, more collaboration, more integration of our people into the conversation. I think what we did with the Portmore Park was a good exercise, and I would recommend that we do some more of the visioning sessions in order to create ownership over what will be the new urban spaces that are environmentally healthy and that can improve the quality of life and well-being of urban dwellers. And we need to get people involved now, get them to be participants in the discussion now. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we are going to, and we must, Ms. Parks, we must achieve sustainable urban renewal and create the Jamaica that we want. That is going to require us to have strategic, multi-sector, multi-agency, multi-department partnership at national, local, and regional and international levels. So on this World Habitat Day, I want to thank everyone that is participating. I want to urge all citizens that will hear and that will have an opportunity to review this session, and all organizations, every business, public and private sector that will be able to hear us. I want to urge you to work together to create the sustainable, the carbon neutral, the socially cohesive and inclusive cities and towns that we deserve to have in this beautiful country that we call Jamaica. They are not going to just occur. It has to be a deliberate effort for us to build towards that kind of vision, and it will take bold steps, which I am willing to do, and the will, the political will to make some decisions that may be uncomfortable and perhaps not receive the favor of all, but that will push us in the direction that we need to move to have a Jamaica where we are achieving our national development goal. I have said it before, and I repeat, the cost of doing nothing is much greater than if we make an effort. So let us make that effort. Thanks again to all of you, and may we have a wonderful World Habitat Day.
Thank you very much, Minister. You have given us the charge this morning as to where you'd want to see us going in terms of our programs and our activities, so that we can enhance our urban spaces, so that we can have more livable communities. Now, you spoke in your address that the development of the built environment can be beneficial. And I recall having gone to some meetings of the United Nations in Nairobi. And I remember the mayor of Spain talking to us in a very enthusiastic way about the how wonderful cities are in terms of economic development. But then you went on to say to us, it must be done judiciously. We must find that balance. And that is a very, very significant statement that you have made, encouraging us to find the balance between human settlements and the environment. Of course, you spoke to one of our more obvious challenges that we face in our urban spaces and right across our landscape. That has to do with the impact of squatting and the sort of vulnerabilities that come with it. But then you encouraged us all to ensure that we take a targeted approach to cauterizing all these negatives, and at the same time, fostering enable frameworks, for example, as we are doing through our national housing policy, to ensure that there is access, there's affordability, what we provide is safe and legal. You also spoke to the fact that it is imperative that we make our cities more resilient through greening, robust building codes, smart infrastructure, infusing innovation and conservation. And then you went on to say that there's a lot of work to do. And that is why we're here this morning, Minister, in recognition that there's a lot of work to do in our urban spaces and right across our landscape. Of course, you talk about the significance of there being interconnection between the different portfolio responsibilities that span both our ministry as well as the interconnectiveness that should come across ministries. So we're talking about joined up government here in ensuring that we are able to address the challenges that we face. And you spoke to the need for more discussion, collaboration, and integration. And this must ensure, and this is a recurring point, ensuring that people are involved, that we get the people involved. The people who are going to be impacted and the people who are going to benefit, they must be brought front and center in what we are doing. And you spoke to the fact that this can be fostered through strategic partnerships at all levels, the international, the regional, and the local. And if we work together, we should be able to create inclusive, carbon neutral, and sustainable cities. And what excited me most, Minister, you say we will take the bold steps and the political will. What a sweet statement to make. We take the bold steps and you will ensure that the necessary political will is there to help us to meet our national development goals. So let us all work together to make our cities better. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much. I want to use this opportunity at this point in time just to identify a few persons. Dr. Janine Dawkins, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Transport and Mining, who's online. Mr. Courtney Winter, the Managing Director of the Jamaica Mortgage Bank. And I also want to say a warm welcome to the heads of agency, any other heads of agency that might be online, to members from the private sector, and of course to our colleagues here in the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. And I see quite a few persons also from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation online. And we are happy to have you and thank you. We are at the point now when we are going to go into our panel discussion. And we have strategically chosen a panel that is diverse in composition, as well as diverse in terms of the different thematic areas that we're going to showcase. Because remember that our urban spaces are complex places. So many different players are involved in the urban space. And that is why it is very significant that we foster partnerships if we are to address the challenges being faced in these spaces. So we're going to go into our panel discussion around the theme. And our panelists include Ms. Sharonette Sampson, Director of Projects at the Ministry of Transport and Mining, Mr. Brian Richardson, Manager Oil and Gas From the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Mr. Anthony Mckenzie, the Director of Environmental Management and Conservation Division at the National Environment and Planning Agency, Mr. Darmart Williams, Senior Director, Eastern Zone. This is from the Forestry Department. And Mr. Raymond Poyser, Senior Director, Urban Renewal and Development, here in the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Let us all welcome them as we are about to go into our panel discussion. And we'll start off with Ms. Shernette Sampson speaking in terms of transport and mining and what they're doing to really assist with improving our urban spaces. Ms. Shernette Sampson.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. This is a wonderful opportunity to share from the Ministry of Transport and Mining on such an important initiative. What I'll do now is try to share a presentation that I have prepared. Okay. Again, thank you for having me here on the World Habitat Day 2021. I'll be speaking on the Ministries of Transport and Mining's policies, programs, projects towards a carbon-free world. And my presentation today will be focused on just a little detail about the Ministry of Transport and Mining, the land transport sector, the maritime transport sector, aviation, and the mining sector. Just to begin, just to note, the Ministry of Transport and Mining purpose encompasses the provision of a safe, efficient transport system and the oversight and regulation of the mining sector. Our core areas will looks at the revision and improvement of policy initiatives, regulatory responsibility for safety of all modes of transport, whether public or privately operated, issuing of licenses and leases for mining operations pertaining to exploitation of the country's mineral resources. Also for the implementation of integrated solutions that will reduce vulnerability to geological hazards and disaster. We're also guided by the Vision 2030 goals. And just to note, according to Vision 2030, the transport sector system comprises of road network, which is over 15,000 km, airport infrastructure of over 2 international airports and several domestic aerodromes, railway network covering approximately 331 km of track and 6 privately owned mining railway lines, maritime transport infrastructure of 14 seaports. All these elements play a critical role in development, meanwhile a significant and also considerably a significant contributor of greenhouse gases. And if we note here that the national strategy speaks to diversifying energy and increasing renewable energy, promote energy efficiency and conservation, to develop and implement environmental stewardship programs, and in the GOG agencies to develop energy diversification priorities in a timely way based on cost, efficiency, environmental considerations, and technology. And of course, Strategy 13, which speaks to sustainable management and use of environmental and natural resources, creating informed leaderships or champions for environmental protection, development, efficient and effective governance structures, government structures for environmental management, create dynamic and responsive regulatory environment review and strengthen relevant environmental legislations, as well as effective regulatory framework which binds government and people, and the legislative reforms in support. Now, as I speak on land transport sector, which is very critical, I just like to note that there's a growing number of vehicles on Jamaica's roadways, which enhances citizens' mobility and convenience, but further, this also heightens the grave and widespread problem of congestion in urban areas. Furthermore, transport is a leading contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in the Caribbean. One of our major areas on the land transport sector is the diversification of our engine mix. And this particularly relates to the JUTC, where the JUTC utilizes fossil fuel consumption and in Jamaica's.
Samson, your presentation is not up.
It's not up. Oh, my bad. Let me cut. Okay, are you seeing it now? Is your presentation being seen now?
Yes, we are seeing it now. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Sure. Right. So as I continue, again, transport is one of those main contributors to climate change globally and a leading contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the Caribbean region. Growing fossil fuel consumption in Jamaica's expanding vehicle fleet is undermining the positive impact of energy efficiencies measures, fuel diversification, and renewable energy development. The MTM's policy position seeks to encourage measures of efficient public transport. Now we have some major projects that are being undertaken. One of those is the natural gas project. We already have piloted 5 CNG buses. The electric mobility project, which is very critical at this moment, where the ministry is seeking to procure 5 battery electric buses to pilot over a 12-month period. We're working closely with the IDB on this initiative. Also, we're looking at biodiesel in the JUTC buses and Elijah filtration bypass system, which is used to reduce engine oil consumption and improve maintenance of the JUTC buses. One of the goals of the ministry is also to look at mass transit transport system. The ministry is now at the point of pursuing the implementation of passenger rail service from the areas Lindsay to Spanish Town and Old Harbour to Spanish Town. And this project is to provide a safe and cost-effective transport for school-aged children who depend on public transport. Just to note, we'll be launching or hopefully launching out for mid-October. We're hoping that face-to-face school starts because the project is really targeted towards school children. And the projected cost for this initiative is 189 million. Just to note, it's a pilot, which should be run for 12 months. Again, under the ITA, they have recently acquired a testing system. This system combines the simple function with high-level measurements of accuracy for O2, CO2, and temperature in motor vehicle exhaust emissions. Just to note that the ITA has acquired this equipment to do research to guide policy development. And this is not really being launched out as yet, but rather to guide policy development. Under the maritime transport sector, which includes ports, harbors that support intermodal terminals, ships, barges that utilize these facilities. Sea transportation is often the only mode of transportation for moving freight in the Caribbean, and we also need to factor in cruise tourism as a factor in maritime transportation. One of those initiatives that were prominent in the Ministry of Transport and Maritime is the Gloomy Project, which is a global maritime energy efficiency partnership project, which looked at energy efficient improvements and policies in the ports, improving energy efficiency in ships, compliance with MARPOL application of sustainable energy solutions, improved air quality in ports, monitoring and compliance mechanisms for emissions from ships, one of the outcomes from the Gloomy were 3 important reports: the National Rapid Assessment of the country's maritime status, energy baselines, targets, and roadmap, National Maritime Energy Efficiency Strategy, and the draft legislation for incorporation of the MARPOL Annex into the national legislation. Again, one of the major areas is the Kingston Freeport Terminal, which has developed an environmental monitoring program to monitor its environmental footprint to minimize and eliminate potential negative impacts on surrounding environment and the country on a whole. Further, we also note that low sulfur fuel is one of those mandatory methods throughout the International Maritime Organization member countries, and stakeholder consultation is one of those key initiatives to address the challenges facing the maritime freight. And also we have worked on the development of the sustainable freight transport strategy for Jamaica. There are a number of policies and frameworks that guide emissions in the shipping industry, and this speaks to emissions related to port operations and shipping are not regulated under air quality regulations. Jamaica is a part of the International Convention for Prevention of Pollution from Ships and the Protocol to Convention Regulations for the Prevention of Air Pollution from Ships, which came into effect in 2005. And also there's an amendment to the Jamaica Shipping Act. Under the aviation sector, we try to seek to be environmentally responsible under airport operations. One of those key areas is the sustainable aircraft gate power solution at the NMIA. This project involves the use of new renewable power sources for aircraft parked at the airport gates being introduced at 2 facilities in Jamaica. The solution eliminates carbon dioxide emissions from former fossil fuels powered by APUs and GPUs, demonstrating a practical and cost-effective methods. The outcome is a reduction of aviation carbon emissions and the carbon footprint. And again, we look at greening of our airports, and one of those interests is the investment in a solar plant to reduce electricity on the bill in the Montego Bay Airport. And this is an initiative that seeks to increase the use of solar using the facility while reducing our energy bill, as well as to reduce our carbon footprint. Under the mining sector, we look at areas where there are initiatives in establishing quarries near to the developments and ports to reduce emissions, use of conveyor belts to reduce the lag time on crushing equipment and to transport mineral, which is bauxite and gypsum, from extraction or source site. Mobile crushers, due to their energy saving and high efficiency capacity, and newer and more fuel efficient trucks, excavators, and bulldozer. As well as continuing this is the New Fortress combined heat and power plant at the Jamalco to provide steam for processes on bauxite, the GISCO Alpart installing of new gas turbines, cooling houses, and stocks, as well as retrofitting the existing facilities. Refueling of helicopter with mapping equipment in the field to reduce flight time, and rehabilitation on reforestation of the mined lands. And just a note, Jamaica's transportation system is most impacted by extreme weather extremes caused by increased temperature. And reducing transport emissions is one of those critical components. It's a daunting task given inevitable increases in the demand for transport. However, in spite of the challenges, the Ministry of Transport and Mining has made significant strides in policy and
it seems that Ms. Sampson has frozen. Are you hearing me all? Are you all hearing me?
Hearing you.
Okay, so it seems like Ms. Sampson has frozen, or there might be a problem with our internet, Wi-Fi. Ms. Sampson, but it would appear that she was near to the end of our presentation. I am just going to look at some of the things that she presented. She spoke to the fact that the ministry itself has responsibility for several modes of transportation, land, air, and sea. And as former Minister Mckenzie would say, multimodal. So they have responsibility for all of these different forms of transportation, and they also have responsibility for the issuing of licenses where it concerns mineral resources. Of course, all of these forms of transportation, because if in your literature you would have read that transportation accounts for a significant portion of the greenhouse gas emission in our urban spaces. And so she mentioned the fact that they have been instituting policies and programs to address a lot of these issues. She talked about having environmental stewards. They talk about having 5G CMGC buses, special buses that would reduce emissions, electric mobility, an initiative that is currently being pursued with the IDB, and the use of biodiesel, and all the old maintenance of buses. Some of us who drive on the road would, however, ask a question about the whole maintenance program for many of our buses that traverse our thoroughfares, because oftentimes if you ever get caught by some of these buses, there's pure exhaust in your faces. So that is one of the issues we would maybe want to raise with Shernet when we go into the discussion segment. But she also spoke to some things that are being done at the in terms of the train, possibility of bringing back short length train rides to take school children. And she spoke to, in terms of the marine environment, energy efficiency measures being put in place to address energy efficiency and the monitoring of emissions. And like Kingston Freeport Terminal is one area where some of these activities are taking place. In the aviation sector, to talk about the greening of our airports and the putting in of solar plants at the Montego Bay Airport, the Donald Sangster International Airport. And of course, in the mining sector, reducing emissions and some of the things that they have been doing, like the use of conveyor belts in the bauxite industry to limit the amount of pollution that will come from transporting or the haulage of these minerals across great distances. So she essentially pointed us to some of the policies, programs, and projects that her ministry is undertaking. What I'm going to ask is that persons reserve their questions until the end, and we're going to allow the presenters all to go through their presentation. Reserve your questions, and then at the end we can have some amount of discussion. So at this time, I want to thank Ms. Sampson for her presentation, and we are now going to ask Mr. Brian Richardson, Manager Oil and Gas, Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, to make his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. I don't have a presentation today, so I took a fireside chat perspective on this. So I'll just talk through a couple of points from the ministry side. But before I kick off, I want to apologize for my PS, Permanent Secretary Carol Palmer. She is unable to participate today, otherwise she would have. So today, SET would like to outline what it has done and what it will do to help accelerate Jamaica's contribution to a carbon-free urban environment. First, let me start with a quote. The time is now to look within ourselves and create that path for a new, bold, and brighter future. It is within our grasp, it's within our reach. Now, that quote, just give me a sec. That quote is from our Minister Vaz, and he made this at a sectoral debate earlier this year. It is that path to a brighter, low carbon emissions future that I wish to outline today. But first, let me provide some context. Globally, today we use more energy than we ever did before. Around some 600 exajoules. Let me say that again, 600 exajoules. We use that every year. This is 1.4 times all the energy consumed globally in 2001. When I say 600 exajoules, that's for the globe as a whole. So it's a huge quantum of energy that's being consumed. So in order to accelerate towards a carbon-free world, an energy transition like this has never been done before. Yes, we have had energy transitions in the past, moving from biomass to coal to steam to oil, liquids, and now to gas renewables like we have largely in Jamaica, and then fully renewables, which is the future objective. But in each transition, we have only added to our previous energy use, meaning that when we went from biomass to steam, we didn't decrease, we increased our energy use. The globe has never taken away from its energy use as is expected during this transition, which is before us. So this one is extremely different, very different. This transition is substantial, and the MSET appreciates the time is now to create a path for a lower carbon future in a sustainable manner. Under SDG goals 7, 9, 12, and 13, amongst others, the MSET has responsibly encouraged, fostered, and created a lower carbon future. Even before it became trendy, the MSET, through its agencies, was always looking to low carbon, zero carbon future when it created Wigton wind farms, which began in 2004. Wigton, as you all know, is the first and the largest of its kind in the English-speaking Caribbean as a renewable energy wind farm. Wigton is now wholly privately owned and has its origins within the MSET. Since 2003, the MSET has facilitated Jamaica's carbon emissions decline by almost 55%. And those are not my figures, 55%. That's an emissions reduction of over half in 18 years. So we have provided the foundation, the baseline, the ability for us to move into that low carbon future. This reduction is driven largely by reducing electricity generated from HFO and through facilitating strategic deployment of renewables across the grid. Between 2016 and 2020, solar PV consumption increased by 700%, renewable wind consumption by about 35%, and low carbon emitting natural gas consumption by over 200%. This resulting in significant reductions in CO2 I mentioned earlier from the production of electricity. In the future, the current IRP will see up to 30% more renewable on the grid by 2025 under competitive procurement through the GPE, Generation Procurement Entity. An updated IRP is also currently being worked on by the ministry. So renewables and other low carbon emissions electricity generation technology will be a much larger percentage of our energy mix by 2030 and beyond. The fully promulgated National Energy Policy, which was awarded the best government infrastructure strategy in the Caribbean by the IMF in 2016, has taken us to where we are today. This was set up specifically to cut Jamaica's energy consumption and includes several other policy pathways that seek to incentivize a lower carbon future. In addition to incentivizing renewables, energy from waste is another critical lever of the NEP that will be facilitated by the MSET. The framework to facilitate electric vehicle mobility in Jamaica is another level. With it, it is hoped by incentivizing EVs that possibly between 12 to 60% of EV penetration in Jamaica will occur over the coming years. Another lever is biofuels, is also a policy that we're looking to explore to incentivize a circular, zero carbon to low carbon liquid fuels market. Another lever is the carbon emissions reduction pathway, and it's being actively pursued within the energy division of the ministry currently. And you'll hear more about it in the near future. Now, with regards to specific programs and projects currently being implemented under the MSET, first, you may have heard of the Urban Traffic Management System, the UTMS. It's a project that reduces the Kingston metropolitan area travel times and consequently vehicle emissions. Now, that's a lot that it does, and the implementation of it, which has begun, we'll see about a 35% reduction in vehicle greenhouse gas emissions. And that's what's anticipated. So ultimately, the system will implement a freer traffic flow through the KMA, and in doing so have reduced stop or wait times at stoplights. And so we will have a more efficient use of the liquid fuels that we do import. Second is the retrofit of several large hospitals across Jamaica to improve energy use and energy efficiency. And that will also seek to improve Jamaica's carbon emissions footprint. So by putting our electricity infrastructure on a lower carbon pathway, by paving the avenues for more renewables on our grid, And by driving energy efficiency projects today, the MSET aims to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and beyond, and create that path for a new, bold, and brighter future, as said by our Minister. And that's it from the MSET for today.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Richardson. Thank you very, very much. Now, you spoke to some of the initiatives as well that MSTED is undertaking, and you spoke to the need for you to establish targets or to attain your SDG goals, particularly SDG goals 7 and 9. So you spoke to the ministry's commitment to increase renewables on the grid, and that sounds very exciting to me. And having cleaner vehicles on the road, electric vehicles, this is a commonality between what you said and what Shernet said from the Ministry of Transport. So I figure that both of you are working together to have this happen. You spoke about the ministry's pursuit of a carbon reduction pathway, and any strategy to reduce the amount of carbon in our atmosphere is beneficial to all. Of course, you also mentioned about having freer traffic flow in the KMA. What a day that would be. Because as it stands right now, if we were to leave our offices and go on the streets to say you're going to do a transaction in your lunchtime, I can tell you, you will not get back in time before your lunchtime is exhausted. So anything to free up the traffic flow in the KMA is a wonderful thing. And of course, I like the fact that your work is not only limited to just your offices, but it is extended across the sector. You talk about retrofitting the hospitals to increase energy efficiency. And we must commend you on the efforts that are being made. You have quoted some figures about how significant the work that you're doing has impacted the amount of carbon, and that has brought about reduction in the levels of carbon emission in our urban spaces and across our country. So we want to thank you. And as I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask it at the end, note your questions and ask it at the end. Now, I just want to remind you that I am Doreen Prendergast, your moderator, and we are discussing our topic today around the theme, accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. We're now going to move to our next presenter. Our next presenter is Mr. Anthony Mckenzie, Director, Environmental Management and Conservation Division at the National Environment and Planning Agency. Mr. Mckenzie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Prendergast. Good morning to my fellow colleagues and participants. I bring greetings from Nepal and to recognize Minister Charles P.S. Hales, Professor Dale Weber, Ms. Antonio, and of course our panelists, Chairman, my colleague Brian, Raymond, and Mr. Williams. I think the host is going to be sharing my presentation, or I can probably share it if you want me to. Yeah.
You're trying to share your presentation?
Okay.
Go right ahead.
You can, yeah, I think you're probably seeing it. Yes, it's being shared by the host. Right, so I'm going to make a few points, and as we discuss this important issue of urban action for a carbon-free world, make some points.
1 second, Mr. Anthony, Mr. Mckenzie. Can they bring up their presentation more fulsomely, that it is clearly being seen by all?
Right, so I presume you're seeing it now. Right, so I'm going to quickly make a few points relating to the point of our ecosystem, the importance of our ecosystem as we consider the question of a carbon-free world in the context of Jamaican or urban areas, and then make some recommendations relating to how we provide support, meaning the agency, NEPA, for carbon-free urban action. Next slide, please. So I'm making this point because I know it was stated before by Prof. and of course Antonio. A vibrant natural ecosystem is important for a number of reasons, but certainly it contributes significantly to carbon neutrality and supporting climate resilience. Just to the next slide. Now, Kingston as an urban area is interestingly sited. One would argue that it is vulnerable to climate shocks and, of course, slow onset events, sea storms. So it's located on the coast, right? But certainly there are opportunities associated with Kingston as it is. It's surrounded in the north by the Yallas and Hope River watershed areas. It's therefore critical that it is recognized that this ecosystem is important. While it's vulnerable, we have to support its resilience. And also, another important ecosystem, it surrounds the Kingston city as well, the Palisados. The Palisados protected area. Palisados Pottery protected area, as we know it as. Now, we have been placing some focus, a lot of focus, in fact, on the Yallas Hope watershed. It provides, as the slide shows, up to 42% of potable water, right? However, it is in fact one of 4 major degraded watersheds within our country. Degraded over the years by the practices. I mean, there have been a lot of farming, coffee farming, and so on. And that has contributed to some amount of degradation. We are working to rehabilitate this natural ecosystem, recognizing its intrinsic natural resilience. And if that can be supported, then to a large extent, Kingston can survive in a future climate context. There's been in the media recently some discussion and concerns, rightfully so, about the mangroves along the Palisados and that it was destroyed by a government agency. I'd like to quickly use the opportunity to indicate that, yes, we have a special focus on the Palisados Port Royal area. It's a protected area. It is a piece of real estate that is really in demand. We have to strike a balance. And of course, Ms. Antonio spoke about nature-based approaches. The work was done to elevate a section of the roadway. And as an agency, we have pushed to support nature-based and hybrid solutions to offer protection to the harbor, and of course, by extension, Kingston. The reality is that despite the competing usage and needs and demands for the Palisados area, over the years, we have managed to maintain the mangrove forests in terms of acreage fairly constant. So what occurred recently? Well, it was the NWC had an emergency, a major pipeline to the Port Royal broke, and they had to enter an area to do fixing and so on, and some mangroves were cleared. So we're working with them to ensure that that area is rehabilitated. So it's important that in the context of carbon-free world and in looking at Kingston, that we recognize the importance of its natural resources and the need for the protection of these resources. Next slide, please. Right, so the agency has an air quality program that's supporting and aims to work towards emissions and source emission reduction. We have seen, and gladly so, a reduction in emissions from some key sectors, particularly power company with the transition to LNG. We have seen significant reduction in that regard, and some of major facilities have transitioned to LNG. We have, in terms of Kingston, targeted some source reduction strategies along some hotspot areas. So, for example, Spanish Town Road and the Rockfoot area, some targeted work to see emission reductions along those corridors. Next slide, please. Yeah. Can we have the next slide? Yes. Now, this particular slide just quickly shows, and I'm going to go quickly, my apologies. So during the COVID shutdown last year, during March, you recall that some of our cities were actually closed down, Portmore, St. Catherine, for example. This slide actually shows a 50% reduction in PM2.5 in the Spanish Town area, in the location of our air monitor in Spanish Town. And that was attributed to the fact that we didn't have any vehicles on the road, right? So there's a 50% reduction in PM2.5. So if you use that as a proxy for carbon emissions, I mean, that's significant. We have heard of these reports all over the world for COVID, but we have that reality in Jamaica, right? So vehicle emissions contribute significantly to our air pollutants within our urban setting. Can I have the next slide, please? Just to indicate that as part of our air quality program, we have 11 air monitors within this urban center. Kingston, we also have air monitors in Spanish Town, Portmore, Maypen, Mandeville, Montego Bay. It's a program that we're expanding so that for all other towns and urban areas, we can also monitor and have a reflection of the state of the air quality in these areas. We have worked on vehicle emission standards, and these we expect to see reflected in the motor vehicle regulations. I think Janet spoke to that a little bit as part of the Road Traffic Act going forward. We've been a part of the team supporting the initiative on e-mobility in the context of the work towards the strategy to reduce emissions from motor vehicles. The next slide, please. Now, one of the policy platforms that as a government, as in an agency, we are promoting with our key sectors. Could you go back quickly to that slide? Is the question of wastewater reuse. Now, our wastewater sector and water delivery sector uses a lot of energy, as you know. But we're supporting the reuse of wastewater. In the climate context, this is critical going forward. We generate a lot of wastewater as an urban area, which is discharged to the Kingston Harbour. But the policy prescription going forward, working with our agencies, the Water Resources Authority, the NWC, NIC, and so on, to move towards a program for wastewater reuse. This is reflected in our regulation that provides for beneficial use and there is a incentive to support that under the licensing regime. Next slide, please. Similarly, with respect to rainwater harvesting, in collaboration with our ministry, rainwater harvesting planning guidelines have now been promulgated, approved by cabinet, and are reflecting now in our approvals process as an integral component to support this effort of greening of our urban area. Next slide, moving as quickly as possible. Now, the adoption of green city planning, and as part of the Kingston Pedro Keys development order, a number of important policy and planning guideline prescriptions have now been included. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay. So, as the minister referred to, there are policy guidelines now on various amenities, green space, open space requirement, greening of specific corridors, urban forest. I mean, we don't have time to probably get into green building, the question of walkability, and a number of policy and guideline prescriptions in the Kingston Development Order that supports a green city for Kingston prescription. Quickly going forward, next slide. Right, so in terms of waste management, again, in terms of looking at pollution, you recall recently the announcement by government of this program for the environmental zone management of pneumatic tires, waste tires. Big issue for us. Ministry has led in this regard. Tires to be accommodated by the cement company. The question of the program for recycling of single-use plastics. That's an initiative that really needs to be expanded and supported. We have the program with our ministry as well for the prohibition of single and the banning of certain specific types of single-use plastics, which we hope to make an impact and indent on the waste stream coming into the Riverton waste disposal facility. Last slide. Green Business Jamaica is a program that's promoted by the agency for environmental stewardship within the private and the public sector. We have some private sector companies on board getting good results. It is like Total, Juicy Beef, the Yes Half Moon Hotel, etc. are on board with these programs that we're expanding as we speak, a few government agencies, looking at water conservation, waste conservation, alternative uses of energy, and so on, as part of this Green Business program. I think I'll stop there for this moment, but those are some of the considerations that we give in giving consideration to urban action for a climate-free world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mckenzie. As the agency with responsibility for planning and the environment, you have laid out a suite of activities that are being undertaken by the NEPA. And you spoke to the importance of there being vibrant natural ecosystems, because these play a major part, a significant role in ensuring carbon neutrality and climate resilience. Of course, you spoke about Kingston. How could we speak, how could we have such a presentation today and not speak about the siting of Kingston and how it is seen in terms of its vulnerability to so many natural and man-made hazards because of its location. And I'm happy to hear that you're doing work in the Yalas Hope River watershed, and you are looking at protecting the mangroves and all these other plant lives along the palisados, and you have also retrofitted the palisados but so that it is more resilient in terms of any form of hazard or natural disasters that might come. You mentioned, made a point, Kingston can survive future climate context. You're ensuring that Kingston can survive future climate context. I'm sure many of us sometimes take it for granted that Kingston is a nice place to live. We don't even think about its vulnerability being brought on by the fact of where it is located. And of course, we know that a lot of persons are moving, particularly into Kingston, brought on by urbanization and the need to find an economic response in order to meet their needs. Many persons are moving into our urban spaces. So I'm happy that you are trying through your work in NEPA to safeguard this very icon of our country, Kingston, by ensuring that our watersheds surrounding it are protected, and like our coastal zones, our coastal areas are also protected. Now, you spoke to the need for us to recognize the importance of nature-based approaches, and this came up, as you said, it also came up in the presentation done by Mrs. Denise Antonio, and Professor Dale Weber would have alluded to some of these. But your responsibility stems not just the environment, the natural environment, but also the man-made environment. And you spoke about reduction in emissions in some key sectors with the advent of liquid natural gas, and how you have seen a significant difference. Something that stood out for me, though, was when you mentioned that with the advent of COVID, you did not quite say it that way, but with the advent of COVID, you would have noted a 50% reduction in CO2 emission in our urban spaces. It's just our urban spaces. This is significant. Are you saying to us that maybe we should look at having less movements in our urban spaces, make them more walkable? The issue of walkability would be supported by this finding, because I observe that a number of countries right through the COVID time have been speaking of some very noticeable differences that they have seen, both in their plant life, in their bird life, in their wildlife. And you're also talking about in our carbon emissions, reduction in our carbon emission. This is really, really remarkable. I was watching TV last week and I observed that France, in this lockdown period, has used the opportunity to pedestrianize a lot of their major thoroughfares in their urban spaces. And I don't know if it is something that we could contemplate. Mr. Poyser will speak later, and maybe he could take on something like this. But I'm happy for your presentation and the work that you're doing in ensuring e-mobility, that our wastewater, we're reusing it, and that we're utilizing our rainwater, and that there is proper planning guidelines around right now to guide many of what we do, much of what we do in our urban spaces. And you've talked about green space along corridors, walkability, the Kingston Development Order giving recognition and providing guidelines for all of this. So once again, Mr. Mckenzie, we want to thank you. Thank you. You mentioned also some of the initiatives that we are jointly doing with you, like the pneumatic tires, the environment. We also have a responsibility for environment in this ministry. They talk about the use of the pneumatic tires. And also you talked about the banning of certain types of single-use plastics. And so right there and then, it brings us right back to the fact that we ought to work as a joined up government in ensuring that our environment is preserved, our environment is protected. And of course, it didn't leave out the business aspect of things. You talked about the partnerships with the private sector in bringing about Green Business Jamaica. So once again, we thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. We'll now go to Mr. Damart Williams, Senior Director, Eastern Zone Forestry Department.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Mrs. Doreen Prendergast, the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister, Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change, Mr. Alvin Hayes, Permanent Secretary in the said ministry, Professor Dale Weber. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Urban areas are major contributors to climate change. Although they cover only 2% of the Earth's surface, they provide more than 70% of global carbon dioxide emission, as well as significant quantities of other greenhouse gases. GHG emissions help to trap heat in the atmosphere, resulting in warmer temperatures. While Jamaica is not one of the larger contributors to GHG emissions, when compared to other countries that are more industrialized, the country stands to suffer the greatest should these environmental matters continue to go unaddressed. Urban forests can play key roles in making cities more resilient to the effects of climate change in both a direct and indirect way. Directly, by sequestering carbon, which is dominant amongst the greenhouse gases. Vegetation and soils of urban forests provide very large carbon sinks, which fixes carbon through photosynthesis and stores excess carbon as biomass. Indirectly, by decreasing urban energy consumption, by shading and cooling, potentially mitigating the urban heat island effect. It is therefore becoming increasingly more recognized globally and locally within the Jamaican context that urban trees can be powerful tools for addressing several challenges in urban spaces while increasing community well-being. In addition to the aforementioned benefits, urban trees improve air quality by removing air pollutants. By shading roads and buildings, trees cool cities, thus reducing energy consumption and saving money. Many tree species produce edible products, contributing to urban food security and nutrition. Planting trees in public spaces and gardens can increase the aesthetic appeal of neighborhoods and the economic value of houses and properties. For example, properly planned and managed urban and peri-urban forests help regulate water flows in cities by intercepting and absorbing rainfall. They also create a favorable environment for animals and plants, thus contributing to biodiversity conservation. They also provide spaces for physical exercise and recreation, thus increasing the well-being, social cohesion, and health of urban communities. Forestry science and practice in Jamaica have traditionally been developed within a rural context. However, in order for there to be an effectual urban intervention by the Forestry Department, the agency, and other players in the forest sector, there must be a transition of thought from understanding forests in the limited context of natural resource production or protection to the idea of the provision of a wide range of sociocultural, economic, and environmental services. There should therefore be a convergence of the green and the gray infrastructures. The Forestry Department therefore recognizes the importance of the services provided by forests and trees to urban dwellers, as well as the fact that investing in the greening of urban spaces can pay dividends while increasing the resilience and livability of urban environments. The agency is currently involved in a number of initiatives and projects aimed at increasing tree cover in urban spaces, which should have the positive externality of reducing greenhouse gases. There are in no way exhaustive, as the agency typically undertakes a myriad of interventions in urban areas outside of these projects and initiatives. The first one I'll mention is the National Tree Planting Initiative. And this initiative is to plant 3 million trees in 3 years, which is equivalent to 1 for each Jamaican, and is also referred to as the 3 in 3 project or initiative. It was launched by the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness back on October 4, 2019, which was observed in that year as our National Tree Planting Day. The objective of the initiative is to support national development in the areas of climate change and reforestation efforts to increase forest cover and establish high-value urban green spaces for all Jamaicans. The agency is leading the implementation of this initiative. The activities that are being undertaken include the identification of suitable lands for reforestation and planting, including parks, roadways, and thoroughfares within major towns. Also, the production of 1.7 million seedlings, including native species, for use in reforestation and tree planting, conducted by the Forestry Department. Through partnerships, produce and plant 1.3 million seedlings, and follow up to ensure the maintenance of seedlings planted. This, of course, goes in the theme of sustainability post-planting. There's also the UNEP project that the agency recently entered into an agreement with the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, to implement aspects of the Building Climate Resilience of Urban Systems through Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, EBA, in Latin America and the Caribbean project. It's quite a lengthy moniker, but we at Forestry Department seem to refer to it as the EBA City Adapt project. The objective of this project is to increase the capacity of governments and local communities living in selected sections of 3 cities in Latin America and the Caribbean, including, of course, Kingston, Jamaica, to adapt to the effects of climate change through the integration of EBA into urban planning in the medium to long term. This is expected to be done by the training of local stakeholders to implement EBA as a cost-effective and sustainable means to adapt to climate change. The promoting the implementation of EBA interventions in vulnerable cities in the LAC, and of course, as I said earlier, in Kingston. Proposing revisions to policies and plans for climate vulnerable sectors such as ecosystem management, urban planning, and water resource management. And also to increase the awareness of ecosystem-based adaptation and improving access to scientific research on EBA. In pursuance of this, the agency will contribute to the implementation of component 2 of this project, which is a demonstration of EBA in Kingston to increase the capacity of urban and peri-urban communities to adapt to the effects of climate change. Specifically, outputs 2.3 and 2.4 will be the focus of the agency. These outputs are as follows. 2.3, the relevant urban EBA interventions demonstrated in Kingston and at the household, urban landscape, and urban catchment scale using the developed EBA protocols. And output 2.4, additional climate resilient livelihood EBA promoted through training and demonstration in community spaces. This project, which is valued at $158,000 US, is slated to conclude in April of 2022. The expected deliverables of the agency, though, are the rehabilitation of 2.3 hectares, which is equivalent to about 1,400 mixed tree seedlings. So we'll be planting ornamentals, fruit trees, as well as timber tree species in lower income community project sites agreed on by the parties. We're also looking under this rubric to have all 1,400 seedlings planted in the Seaview Gardens community. In fact, just today, we're supposed to be delivering at least 100 of those seedlings to get the planting commenced at the earliest possible time. Another expected deliverable is the 800 seedlings, again, ornamental fruit and timber, being planted within schools and other agreed sites in the Kingston and St. Andrew area. This has already commenced, and it is hoped, it is intended to be completed by November of this year. There's also the planting of 3,200 trees in the Hope River Watershed Management Unit using drought resilient tree species. We have already commenced activities to meet this particular deliverable in two forest estates, the Newton Forest Estate and the Good Hope Forest Estate. And again, it is expected that these planting activities will be concluded by the end of this year, this calendar year, just in line, of course, with the rainy season. Finally, we'll also have the rehabilitation of 2 hectares of wetlands in the Palisades Port Royal protected area. This is to increase water storage. This will be done, of course, in collaboration with UWE, at the UWE spearheading this consultancy. The agency, of course, the Forestry Department, is also spearheading the government's national program to become REDD+ ready by 2026. In order to meet the country's international obligations and to be a participant in REDD+, the agency plans to integrate a carbon stock monitoring system, as well as determining forest emissions under a new forest monitoring system. Reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, REDD, in developing countries was created by parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It is a climate change mitigation program that incentivizes developing countries to reduce or remove forest carbon emissions by awarding them carbon credits. To qualify for REDD+ incentive payments, Jamaica must prove that it has reduced its national greenhouse gas emissions through any of the following activities: reducing emissions from deforestation, reducing emissions from forest degradation, conservation of forest carbon stocks, sustainable management of forests, and the enhancement of forest carbon stocks. By the final stages of the REDD+ program, Jamaica will be able to accurately report on a local forest carbon emissions and earn from the successful implementation of emission reduction initiatives. After successful implementation of the framework for REDD+, Jamaica will qualify to earn from reducing emissions and removing carbon from the air through forest carbon sinks. Currently, the agency's National Forest Management and Conservation Plan, that is a 10-year sector plan between 2016 and 2026, has outlined strategies and actions to achieve this. This will see the agency implementing a revised approach to national forest inventories inclusive of carbon monitoring, the annual determination of national forest reference emissions levels. In building the agency's capacity, a European Union budget support program aimed at supporting and increasing the capacity of the agency to execute its core functions, considering global climate change challenges and drivers, carbon stock assessment was launched. This was back in 2018. Under Indicator 5 of this program, a pilot study is to be conducted where the agency is tasked with assessing 9 forest estates over a 4-year period. Year 1 was preparation and training, and year 2 involves assessing 1 forest estate, year 3, 2 forest estates, and year 4 involves assessing 5 forest estates. So I'll just quickly go through some key considerations for the future in terms of urban forestry within the Jamaican context. I think if these considerations are favorably adopted, then we can see some further reduction in our carbon emissions and sequestration, of course. We should adopt policies to increase urban tree cover to fulfill national and global carbon reduction requirements. Design direct and indirect incentives for the creation of sustainable management of urban forests and other green infrastructure aimed at climate change adaptation and mitigation. And the Honorable Minister earlier alluded to the Green Economy Investment Strategy, which to some extent should address some of these issues. We should also consider the likely impacts of climate change on tree and forest growth when determining sites and selecting species for the establishment of urban forests. We should also adopt an ecosystem approach to managing urban forests as a way of maximizing carbon sequestration, while also increasing the complexity, resilience, and adaptability of biological communities. In closing, on this World Habitat Day, the Forestry Department remains committed to playing its part in achieving significant carbon reduction by infusing elements of the green infrastructure into our urban spaces to make them more sustainable and more livable. So we encourage everyone to plant a tree. In fact, plant many trees as we restore our ecosystems and renew our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darmart, for your presentation. If we were not convinced that a lot of the heat we are feeling is coming as a result of greenhouse gas emission, we would have sufficiently been convinced in this session. Mr. Darmart pointed to the fact that GHG emissions trap heat. And many of the other presenters have said it, and they have contributed to urban heat islands. And so when you're feeling very, very hot, I think it should tell you, go outside and plant a tree. Go out and plant a tree. But he pointed out the importance of trees to our existence, our very existence. Some of us take trees for granted, but it's at the center of our existence. He spoke about it providing shading and cooling, thus reducing the heat. It saves energy. It serves as carbon sinks. It's a sequester for carbon. And many of us will also, coming up in terms of our culture, would recognize the importance of trees. Miss Lou sang about it. Miss Lou said it was under the coconut tree, darling, under the coconut tree. So some of us might just make proposals under the coconut tree. So it behoves us all to ensure that we plant some trees. I'm excited by the work that is being done in forestry, and us in housing ought to see the importance of trees. If Mr. Darmart pointed out that trees help to increase the economic value of our houses. When you see a beautifully landscaped area, and when you see houses, what we call it, talk about curb appeal now, those who are watching HGTV, and see them putting some lovely trees and some lovely gardens at the front of your houses, automatically the prices of these units go up. So it behoves us to invest in our tree coverage, invest in increasing our tree coverage. Now, you spoke about some of the programs you are doing. You talk about an eBay City Adapt project and a number of deliverables that are to come from it, like the rehabilitation of some hectares of lands in low-income communities. And we are happy to hear that, because many of these communities are also beset with a lot of challenges, poor infrastructure, garbage, and all of that strewn across the landscape, and the absence of trees in many instances. Apart from that, a lot of these communities are also in very, very vulnerable areas that are prone to the negative impact of climate change. So I'm happy that you're working in those areas. Your fruit and timber planting in schools. The fruit trees can always augment the meals that the children eat. The planting of trees in our watersheds to prevent our low-lying areas from being flooded out and our hillsides from eroding. And the rehabilitation of several hectares of land along the Palisadoes spit. And others would have spoken about that. And you talk about your national program, Red and Ready. And this will help us improve our carbon stock monitoring. And of course, you have your forest management and conservation plan and your pilot with the EU. Of course, you'll be able to adopt policies that will help to make our urban spaces more livable by planting more trees, adopting the ecosystem approach, as you call it. So we are all encouraged today to ensure that we give more than a glance at our trees, but we place trees front and center in our planning and our development. And he closed by saying, plant a tree. And you're all being encouraged to plant a tree. Our minister has been planting many trees as we go across the island and go to the different project sites. he makes it a point of duty to plant a tree. And so you're all being encouraged to plant a tree. All right, thank you very much. Now our final presentation will come from Mr. Raymond Poyser, the Senior Director, Urban Renewal and Development in the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Poyser, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Moderator Mrs. Prendergast. The Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Dr. Alwyn Hales, Permanent Secretary in Newark. Professor Weber, Ms. Denise Antonio, and my fellow panelists. Good afternoon. It's a very wonderful opportunity, given the fact that this is World Habitat Day, and at the ministry with responsibility for housing in Jamaica. And as a matter of fact, all the portfolio areas that are being covered this morning, we take this opportunity seriously because of the work that we do and intend to do for the betterment of Jamaica and the people of Jamaica whom we serve. The vision for urban renewal at this ministry is safe, vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable urban centers, providing all users with adequate services for an enhanced quality of life through effective partnerships and network. And this vision emphasizes several things. Chief among them would be proactive action. We're not sitting down and waiting for things to happen before we react. We are making bold, innovative, and strategic steps out there, given the fact that there's never been a ministry charged with this responsibility to undertake urban renewal of our urban spaces. And so the task is daunting and the challenge is great, but we have the capacity, we have the experience, and we have the leadership necessary at this time, given from our Permanent Secretary, our Chief Technical Director, and of course our Minister. So this vision also values safety and sustainability. It recognizes the need for partnership opportunities while promoting citizens' participation. And of course, it supports and enhances quality of life for all users. And this vision for urban renewal represents a paradigm shift that seeks to articulate the importance of the new urban agenda, which is of course a shared vision for a better and more sustainable urban future. This was adopted at Habitat 3 in Quito, Ecuador in 2016, sorry. And the new urban agenda underlines the linkages between good urbanization and job creation, livelihood opportunities, and improved quality of life, which should be included in every urban renewal policy and strategy. And to provide context for the situation that we face, not only as a global community, but Jamaica, we are going to zoom in our reality that we face here in Jamaica. So while the global population in 1950 would have been around 746 million and increased to 2.3 billion in 2000, we have seen we are up to 2021. It is the urban population that is 4.2 billion people. And this is projected to reach 70% by 2050, which means 70 out of every 100 persons globally will be living in an urban area. And this, by virtue of that projection, would mean that an additional 2.5 billion people will be cast in urban centers by 2050. So we see we're we are faced with serious population growth, especially within our towns and cities. In Jamaica, our population, the urban population in 1990 was 50.4%. And in 2001, that increased to 52.1%. In 2011, with the census data, it was 54%, which means 1.4 million Jamaicans were living in urban areas based on the last census at 2011. And this is projected to be around 58 or 60% by 2050. I also want to put into even greater context the fact that we only have 4 parish capitals. So we have 4 main towns in Jamaica that are not located along the coast. And that's Half-Way-Tree, Mandeville, Maypen, and Spanish Town. So we see where a large proportion of our economic activities and our settlements are located along the coast and in built-up areas, which means that we have to think strategically now, how are we going to reshape the future and shape the future of these townships and urban centers. It has been said already by the Honorable Minister, as well as Professor Weber outlined these statistics in terms of the energy consumption in cities and what cities are responsible for in terms of greenhouse gases emission. So I won't even go over that, except to say that cities, we have, in terms of the greatest problems that we face within the 21st century, and these are problems that are not going to go away anytime soon unless we have serious partnership, political will, and massive investment. This is urbanization and climate change. Because as I outlined earlier, the global urban population has grown immensely and continues to grow, which means greater pressures will be placed on infrastructure services, transportation, housing, land use, environment, and of course, the ecological systems within cities. What we have recognized and is that the evolution of urban development, how we practice urban development over the years. At one time, it was complementarity in cities and urban development. Then the focus was on economic and social elements and development. And up to the 1990s, and mainly shaped by Agenda 21 and influenced by the Brundtland Report, we see where environmental aspects have been included in the discourse and the practice. And this is important because of the growing pressures that are placed on cities. More people are coming to cities. Cities are hubs for better quality of life, and we have to plan for this. At the ministry, our urban renewal program will take into consideration, of course, carbon sequestration, and as I said earlier, the strategies that we want to adopt and implement represents a bold and innovative approach to advancing the planning objectives of livability, sustainability, and equity, which are key tenets of the new urban agenda. I want persons to understand that changing cities and changing lives have become permanently and intrinsically linked. There's no going back. So we have to live with cities and live with the growth that we are experiencing. But at the same time, we have to redefine and reshape how we are going to live within our cities and take care of our environment, providing for a carbon-free world. And so some of these measures would be definitely through the development of an urban policy. We do not have an urban policy governing urban development, urban renewal and regeneration, or urban governance and urban management. And so our ministry believes this is very important, that there is a strategic direction and policy framework for all of these urban renewal and development issues. This policy will be influenced and linked definitely to Vision 2030 Jamaica, the new urban agenda that looks at livability, sustainability, equity, and of course, inclusivity, the Sustainable Development Goals, and global climate action. It warrants a revolution in our urban planning systems, which calls for a design for climate-friendly urban farms. We're talking about compact development, mixed land use, connected and accessible cities and urban spaces, reduce vehicular trips, promote non-motorized transport. And I heard moderator Mrs. Prendergast mentioning some of these earlier when she was doing summary of the presentations. We want to encourage pedestrian zones in our major towns. When we look at all our parish capitals, all of them suffer from congestion. We have vehicular traffic interacting with pedestrian traffic. And this is why we have the poor air quality in our built up areas. So we want to lessen that. We want to make our cities more pedestrian friendly and attractive to users. So we want to encourage pedestrian zones. Also create green corridors and coastal parks. We have a lot of lands along our coastal areas. We don't want them to just for aesthetic purposes, but to cause a replenishing of our environment and to add to the health of the general environment. Through nature-based solutions to create carbon sinks, we are promoting green technology and applications. We will be enhancing our parks and open spaces. We'll be creating green public spaces in the old areas of our townships and cities. And I am so happy that my colleague from forestry outlined about the Tree in Tree project. And this ministry is leading the charge where we will be accelerating tree planting initiatives. All of our urban renewal programs will be including this as we go along. We are encouraging green buildings. We are encouraging urban agriculture, not only for livelihood purposes, but also to help in creating carbon sinks. We are also encouraging recycling initiatives in urban communities. And this is both geared towards economic livelihood and economic sustainability, as well as reducing the use of plastic as we go along, and in terms of virgin plastic. So it's about recycling and, reducing the amount of carbon that we emit. So while we work to create better cities, it is important that there are new and renewed partnerships, sustained budgetary support, and I heard the minister mention political will and commitment in this effort. Very important. We cannot go on without the political will and commitment to these initiatives that we have to undertake in shaping the future for better cities. It is a difficult yet necessary balancing act of achieving economic prosperity, social justice, and environmental protection for urban spaces and urbanites. Cities are the incubators of innovation and new technologies, and we must harness this strength for better climate change solutions. A rethinking and visionary thinking of urban development is most warranted if we are to address the problems of unplanned urbanization and create more sustainable designs that respond to the environment and urban spaces. Essentially, we cannot continue to function as usual and then expect different results. We all know what Albert Einstein had to say about that. Clearly, in order to tackle this climate emergency for carbon-free cities, we need to adopt radically different approaches and make bold, inspiring choices. Our indecision or lack of conviction will deprive future generations of a better future. As decision makers, we have to understand and realize that we have the power to either support resilience, equality, and low carbon development by decisions that we make today and in the future. And so we have a responsibility, and I am so happy that the theme for World Habitat Day is accelerating. And that's the key part, accelerating, because we cannot sit back and allow things to continue as they are. We have to put our feet to the accelerator and press full speed ahead while we shape our cities and the future of our cities, because urbanization is a real process. Climate change is a real phenomenon. And we have the responsibility within our lifetime here to make a significant contribution. We should not drop the ball in this instance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Poyser. Do not drop the ball. As Butcher Bantam would say, driver, don't stop at all. So that is what we are advocating today in a good way, though, in dealing with our urban spaces. Mr. Poyser, you established the link between what we are doing today and the new urban agenda. And you too recognize the challenges being encountered in our urban spaces and the fact that many of our towns and cities across Jamaica are coastal, which makes them even more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Now, you mentioned that we ought to look at how we practice development of our urban spaces, as we know that cities play a very important part in our development. So we are not downplaying the significance of cities and what it contributes to our economic development and well-being. But we are saying, look at how we go about developing our urban spaces and treating them. You spoke to the whole business of taking bold steps and to ensure sustainability and inclusivity of our urban spaces. And the fact that we maybe need to look at how we define how we use our urban spaces. You pointed us to some of the policy initiatives that you are hoping to spearhead in terms of the urban renewal arm of the ministry, which is a new arm of the ministry. You talk about adopting climate-friendly urban forms, moving towards more compact cities, and pedestrianizing aspects of cities, establishing green corridors, coastal forests, enhancing our parks and creating green spaces where they did not exist. And of course, the whole recycling initiative you spoke of, which many other partners would have mentioned earlier, and the need for there to be new and sustained partnerships, financial support, and political will. And these had come up before. And of course, rethinking our urban development. We can't continue with business as usual. We can't continue with business as usual. So I'm imploring all of us to take what is happening in our urban spaces and in our general human settlements seriously and play our part, as we would say for Jamaica, in advancing the welfare of our Jamaicans and the whole human race. That brings us to the end of the presentations, but we are now going to go into some questions. I'm going to allot of approximately 10 minutes for persons. You can raise your hands and we will address you if you have any questions you want to ask. And the respective presenter, I'm asking you to be prepared to chime in if the question relates to you and help us to answer. So it's now question and answer time. And therefore, we're near to the end of our program. I know that some persons are hungry, but we are near to the end. We'll have the questions, then the minister will launch a competition for the secondary schools, and we'll have the vote of thanks and we wrap up. So we're near to the end. Are there any questions? Anybody with question? Yes, I see a question in the chat. Let me click on the chat and a question from YouTube. They want to know what is going on with the house market in Jamaica. The middle class is outpriced. Is there any hope? They're asking, a question specific to housing. And I could try to say that a mix of approaches are being utilized in terms of the housing sector. Government has been playing more of a facilitator role or an enabler role, in that the private sector is playing its part. Our government agencies are playing their part. The government agencies, they are targeting more middle to lower income category. The NHT, I don't know if any of them, if any representative from NHT is online, but they have just advertised a suite of solutions that they are bringing on the market. HAJ too has a fair share of housing solutions that they are bringing on the market. And of course, we continue to partner with our private sector companies in bringing additional solution. We will admit that demand outstrips supply, but as we continue to strategize and try to be more inclusive, you should be seeing more housing solutions with more options for different categories of persons coming on board. You would have heard in our Prime Minister's budget presentation that he did from last year when we had this new administration, that he has set a target of bringing on board approximately 70,000 solutions by now and the end of this political term. So we are working with our partners, and of course you have like the NGO communities who are also making their contribution in their own way. So that is what is happening with the housing market as it stands now. Any other question? Any question pertaining to the panelists? I want to ask a question to ShareNet and Ministry of Transport, because I see so many buses on the road and the smoke that is coming from these buses is like it is going counter to all that we are discussing here. Can you speak to the maintenance planning that is in place for our public buses, and what else is being, you might have mentioned, somebody can reiterate what else is being done to cut the level of emission from our public transport? ShareNet?
Right,
Yes.
thank you for that question. Okay, well, the JOTC has a fleet of 484 buses generally. And just to note, most of them are approximately probably at least a half is over 10 years old. And the JUTC, yes, they do have a maintenance program in place to improve the efficiency of these buses. And just to note, as a part of our initiative under the Ministry of Transport and Mining, yes, we're aware of the extent of pollution from the buses. It is evident, especially when the buses are in the transportation center, and it as well is with the soot inside of the transportation.
Go ahead, ShareNet, your microphone is closed. I don't know. Go ahead, ShareNet. ShareNet? Your mic is closed. All right. ShareNet seems to be having some challenges. Let us take a question from Mr. Damien.
Sorry, yes.
Okay, she's
yes.
back. All right.
I think the host I was locked out from the host.
Okay.
Right. So just to indicate some of the initiatives that are taking place, which is the Electric Mobility Project, which we are piloting 5 EV buses within the Ministry of Transport and Mining. It's a pilot project that is being taking place for 5 months. What we're doing also is a comparative analysis of the current fleet that we have. We have recently piloted the CNG buses And we're looking at even importing more cleaner diesel buses. And we're doing a comparative analysis to collect data to see what the extent of emission, how do they perform on the roads versus, like, for instance, the terrain versus the flat areas. And so these are the initiatives that's been undertaken by the ministry. And yes, we're trying to bring our fleet up to date, because most, as I said, most are old, and probably that's why you're seeing the extent of the emissions from these buses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sampson. I'm now going to invite Damian Gordon to ask his questions. Damian, or his question.
Good afternoon, all. Not so much a question, but an observation coming out of the presentations, where each of the presenters would have indicated some interconnectivity across the different sectors as it relates to the action being taken to reduce the impact of climate change on Jamaica in general. However, it is knowledgeable that the threats that we are facing, we don't contribute the level of greenhouse gases to really impact us in the way that we are being affected. And a lot of this is based on, more so to be specific, our neighbors from the north who contribute to way higher levels of greenhouse gases than we produce. So coming out of this, I think based on this, the success that we are seeing from the interconnection or inter work that we achieved with the different entities, I think it's time for us as a region to galvanize support in terms of us being small island states who are severely affected by these environmental impacts, to lobby as a region for our neighbors who contribute to the significant levels of greenhouse gases that affect us. For the UNDP representative is here, so that is an entity that we can start with to lobby to get some support to get a reduction from our neighbors who contribute to the larger extent in greenhouse gas that we are facing, and to some extent, because the action, even though what we are doing is commendable and in the right direction, I doubt if we as a nation just do what we can, the impact that we are facing, it will not be reduced to the level that is desired. So I think our action should now extend to our Caribbean neighbors to see how we can have these actions as a regional effort to see how we can get a better effect from the actions that we are putting in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that some of the persons who are involved in the whole COPs might be online. Professor Weber, as I said, the resident rep from UNDP, Anthony from NEPA. And so I don't know if any of you want to just mention briefly some of the work that is being done in this regard, because I know that work is being done in this regard, in lobbying the bigger countries to reduce their carbon output. Anthony, or any of you can speak, whoever is on, who works.
Well, I'm not the authority on this, but what I can say is that based on the pronouncements from the major emitters and for the discussion that will take place at the COP next month, that there seem to be some commitments from the major emitters, and I think we're seeing some leadership from the US in that regard. But most countries have established their national determined contribution, but every country has to play its part, despite not being a major emitter. I think countries have agreed that they will play their parts. And of course, the major emitters, as was said a while ago, we need to take some bold action. And I think they're preparing themselves for those commitments, additional commitments for the meeting next month in the UK. But yes, we are disproportionately affected as a small island state, despite the fact that we don't emit that level of greenhouse gases. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. There's an N. Whittingham who wants to ask a question or say something. N. Whittingham. N. Whittingham. The hand was up, but it's no longer there. All right. Any other question? Anybody else with another question? Let me look.
Nyan Whittingham here. Sorry about that. I was you know, the host has control over some of the mutants, so I wasn't able to come on.
Okay.
All right. So thank you for taking the question and that great set of presentations. Welcome to everybody. Happy Monday, first and foremost. All right. So a lot of the discussions is structured around climate change. And when climate change globally, it's a two-part. I have a partial comment and partial question. Climate change normally is on a global level, but as we look at habitat as a topic, and let's take it more localized and look at Jamaica as our habitat, and that means we have to go towards the low-hanging fruits. My question is, to what extent is Jamaica, given all the institutions and legislation and sanctions we have, to what extent are we taking advantage of those low-hanging fruits? Because it seems as if we are walking by this mango tree, seeing those juicy mangoes hanging over the neighbor's wall and complaining that we're hungry. So we look at the way we environmental management as it relates to garbage collection, to the way people recycle, the extent to which there are fines, and if the fines are being thoroughly executed or implemented, where implementation is concerned, our persons being fined, and at a level which leads to a deterrent of certain behavioral patterns. Those are some of our low-hanging fruits. And I'm concerned that while, yes, we need to lobby globally, those major players, we know that within the policy domain, there are certain policy changes that don't take place easily, irrespective of how much lobbying is done. That sometimes takes a major event that creates what people within the academic world might view as a policy window. And that window allows people who are lobbyists to then enter through the building or enter the building and get their voices heard to those that set the agenda. And currently we don't have that. What's happening right now is a pandemic. So lobbying is good and very encouraged, but I'm afraid that we need to focus now on the low-hanging fruits, especially we're in a hurricane season, and we in Jamaica are susceptible to flooding and all these things where gullies we have landslides and gullies flooding over. We see what happened when a little bit of rain falls on Marcus Garvey Drive. For those in Kingston, we understand what happens down in the Negril side, so Westmoreland people understand that. And that climate change impacts them especially where the sea comes over and almost takes over the streets. So a lot of these things come from some of the low-hanging fruits that we can pick. Businesses and how they dump. They just put their garbage out. They don't pay a garbage collector or try to arrange something to pick it up on a timely basis, or they've been fined. People who are dumping in the gullies that they live by nearby, or we treat in those communities. People who are burning garbage, things like that. So,
all right, your question. All right, thank you. Your question, though long, is grounded in the. I am assuming. Well, I surmise that you're asking what enforcement measures are we employing in ensuring that some of the things that are happening do not happen You spoke about fines, and so I don't know if Anthony can speak to some of the enforcement measures that NEPA is undertaking. I don't know if Minister wants to come in, because he's saying we're not taking on the low-hanging fruits. We're not tackling the things that are within our reach as we should. So I'm going to ask Anthony and Minister Charles, if he's listening in, to come in here.
But I mean, I can speak from a NEPA point of view. In terms of the legislation that we administer, some are in need of updating as it relates to the fines, and that process is in train. We expect that in terms of the NRC Act, those fines would be increased. I mean, they will target for those amendments to be completed by the end of December. Similarly, with respect to the Wildlife Protection Act, those fines were recently increased, so we are able to bring prosecutions and levy fines, effective fines in relation to the Wildlife Protection Act. But the NRC Act, we're getting that updated. So I want to, I suppose, agree to a large extent with the point being made in terms of the deterrence from a level of fines. And those have been worked on, I can say comfortably. And with respect to the NRC Act, those will be effective by the end of December. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I see where a similar question had come from Ryan Wallace. You were saying, oh, how are we going to boost our enforcement arm to reduce waste in the built environment as one mitigation tool to boost our cities to be climate change resilient? So Brian is asking that. So there's another enforcement question around waste. Is anybody from the Ministry of Local Government online? Anybody from local government online? And there is, so generally the whole issue of enforcement has come up, and one pertains to our solid waste management. How do we go about managing our solid waste? Nobody from the local government ministry is online, but I must say that as a ministry, the policies effected by us in terms of the ban on the single-use plastic would have helped somewhat. Our attempts to reuse the tires in a different way that would have helped somewhat. I'm not saying it is all comprehensive, and I can't speak with authority because it's not really my area here right now, but I do know that some effort is being made, but there's still room for improvement. We have always suffered generally as a country in terms of enforcement, and we continue to struggle, but with every effort and as we strengthen our policies and our legislation, we should see greater conformity. Minister's mic is open now, and I'm going to invite him to say something.
Thank you, Mrs. Prendergast. Thank you to Anthony, and thank you also for the questions from Mr. Wallace and others. You know, I think we all agree that there has been a long-standing issue in terms of how we have approached enforcement. It's not just relating to environment. I think it's a general issue that we have, and that sorry, I think I muted myself. Yeah. Perhaps it's just a feature of where we are in the evolution of our development. But it is something that the ministry acknowledges, and we are putting in place the necessary framework to see how we can remedy that. And that is what you would have heard Mr. Mckenzie and Ms. Prendergast lay out in terms of the various legislative targets that we have made. We have some ambitious targets from the Environmental Risk Management branch. In addition to that, we're also looking on advancing the environmental agenda in terms of the zones. So you see what we're protecting in Black River, And you see the efforts of Ms. Guthrie and her team to really now, work with other agencies to get the policies out. I think about maybe 3 Parliament sessions ago, we had several white papers, several of the documents from this ministry in Parliament, including not just environmental issues, but also the climate change policy update. All of those things are going to augur to our benefit in the long run. We have to look also on strengthening the staff complement and raising the capacity and understanding of persons within our ministry and also within communities, so that we can avoid the need for this aggressive enforcement. And I think both have to be done at the same time. So people know we are serious about protecting the environment, but also that they can feel a part of the effort and they can understand why it's important to protect the environment. That, Mrs. Prendergast, Mr. Poyser, it will form a large part of our Renew Jamaica initiative, which is going to be an initiative, Mrs. Prendergast, that which will drive the interconnection between our portfolio areas, which will be geared towards behavior change, and which will also complement our efforts to create the framework to advance enforcement, and ultimately to see if we can get this right once and for all. It's a difficult task because everything is at a cost, whether it is economic or otherwise. Everything is going to call on you to either shift resources or get the money to allocate towards the resources. That is why I think we have to take the time to make sure that the decisions we are making and the actions that we are sanctioning are sensible and sustainable activities that are going to inure to our benefit in the long run. And that will be the intersection now between the Urban Renewal Initiative, the intersection between the environmental agenda, the climate action agenda, the housing policy. All of that requires us to be disciplined in how we move forward, to make sure that when we are talking about no-build zones, or when we're talking about building resilient or building sustainable communities, or moving people out of places where they are vulnerable, we're just going to have to make some bold decisions, and they won't be decisions that everybody is comfortable with. This is the reality. We are going to have instances where people will, I'd say not just oppose, but perhaps aggressively reject the approach. And that is why our approach has to be fitted from the basis of empirical evidence. It has to be structured in such a way that it is strong enough to withstand the opposition. And it must reflect the new thinking, the new era of sustainable development, of advancing resilience, of creating the Jamaica that the next generation and the generation after that deserve. We can achieve it. We don't have a choice. We must achieve it. So I charge us all with the responsibility of making sure we do the work. We also have to look on the comparison, Mrs. Prendergast, of other jurisdictions. We have to look on what's taking place elsewhere, what has worked elsewhere, and see exactly how we can make sure that we have judicious fines, and where things are important to us, we must make examples of some of the stakeholders that are breaching the current and whatever future legislation we put in place. There is an unfortunate narrative and an unfortunate unspoken understanding in Jamaica that people draw the conclusion they can get away with things. That has to change. People must understand that when there is a law when there's a framework, it is put in place to protect all. And the rule of law must become structured and must be the order of the day. It is not easy. It's not easy. Yeah. And as I say to my team all the time, I don't mind being the bad guy when it comes on to doing what is right. And I know we're gonna get some resistance, but we have to push through that resistance, because behind that resistance, I believe strongly, will be a whole new era on the other side of changed thinking, which is going to inure to our benefit. I'm driving, as I close, I'm driving on Washington Boulevard recently and wind down my window. And I just have to wind it back up because of the smell. I mean, it was, Raymond, I tell you something, horrible. Why does our city have to smell like a pit? I mean, Riverton burns incessantly. People just burn whenever they want. The garbage is thrown all over the place. We do not respect our environment as much as we should. And it's unfortunate because the same persons will go elsewhere and preach environmental protection, and they will act in accordance with those laws. No, the order of the day must be that this is your country, you must respect it, and we have to put in place the systems and the parameters to ensure that things like air quality are a priority for everyone. Because in this time, like now, when you have COVID-19, if you do not prioritize air quality, then you will have many persons triggered with asthma and respiratory issues, which will lead to them becoming more susceptible to the fatal impact of the COVID-19. So we have to see the cycle and the connections. We have to see how things are interconnected. Waste management is not within our ministry, that's NSWMA, but the efficacy behind it and the efficiency behind it is something that we are working on here. And I've had meetings with the team that the Prime Minister has set up to work on the whole transition of Riverton. Matter of fact, I meet with them tomorrow again to see how we can push that efficiency so that Riverton moves from being a scourge, something that is stinking up the whole Kingston, St. Catherine, and everywhere, to being a beacon of hope, where people can see waste becoming energy, where people can see what is garbage and dump becoming transitional, ingredients and material that will be used for the creation of different kind of innovative products. This is the Jamaica that we want, and these are some of the priority areas for me. As I said to you, air quality, minimizing plastic waste, treating with the waste management. These are the things that are impacting our children. When you think about the children that live near these areas, yeah, and you talk to them, some of them will tell you they're scared to go to school sometimes, because just walking from home to school, or the impact of it alone. So I leave it there. And I also need to just indicate why I couldn't come out earlier is because, as you know, Mrs. Prendergast, I'm still
in
struggling cabinet, and I was giving a presentation. So I was hearing you, but I wasn't able to respond to you in that regard. So afford me the opportunity to be back and forth.
All right, Minister, I want you to stay with us because we're getting close to you launching the program. But thank you for taking the time out to come and answer the question. You have some cheerleaders online, Minister. Mr. N. Whittingham, the VP of the Caribbean Organization Development Network. He's cheering you on based on what you just said, as well as Ryan Wallace. And we are all in agreement with what you said, Minister. And it's great to have a policy advocate present here in our session today, to speak strongly and definitively as to the way you want to see us go. Thank you very much. I'm going to take the last question from Otis Roberts. He's one of our own staff member, And then after that, I'll move straight into Minister launching of the competition for secondary schools, and we'll do the vote of thanks and wrap up. We have kept you long enough. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much. Otis?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, CTD, and good afternoon, all. I have a simple comment. I think it is imperative that we get the buy-in from the public as it relates to what we are trying to achieve now. My reason for saying this is that we all have a individual carbon footprint. So while there is a country carbon footprint, we all have an individual or personal carbon footprint, which involves what we eat, the clothes we wear, stuff like that. And if we don't have the buy-in at the individual level, what we are going to do now is going to be futile. That's my input.
Thank you, Otis. And that ties into, I think it was Mrs. Denise Antonio's presentation and someone else's presentation that spoke about bringing people to front and center in our planning and decision making. So it is one thing that came up earlier, and we thank you for pointing it out, bringing it down to the level of the individual to say we all have a part to play in ensuring that our carbon footprint is reduced. All right, so thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Minister Charles to launch the competition for secondary schools. Minister Charles? Hope he's not gone back to cabinet. He's not gone speaking in cabinet again. Can someone indicate to Minister Charles that we are ready for him? I'm just waiting for Minister to get back Minister Charles' attention shortly, folks. Mr. Charles is coming back on now shortly. We just got in because, as he says, he's going between cabinet and us. So he's coming back on to speak with us. Just to do that launch quickly. And then we're through. Okay, he sent a note to say it'll be here soon. I think. Is there any other question, anything else anyone wants to say as we wait on Minister to just come and do the launch that we can do the vote of thanks?
CTD Pendergrass, I'll just add quickly to what was said by Mr. Whittingham about low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
One of the things that the ministry is doing is looking at energy efficiency because it's one of the lowest hanging fruits that we have. And we're pushing along with the UNDP. It was spoken to earlier to ensure, like at our hospitals, we reduce their energy consumption. And there's also one very critical step that is being taken, and you'll hear about it soon, about banning incandescent bulbs. Because that's a significant step in ensuring that, as has been said, any individual, if you're buying a bulb, it's not an incandescent bulb because it burns just that much more energy than, say, a CFC or an LED bulb. And that saves Jamaica in the long run and over a very long period of time. And so that's a huge low-hanging fruit, and it's being picked, so to speak.
I also think we need to up our communication with the public, because we have some very, very good programs, but sometimes the ordinary man who it is targeting is not even aware that these programs exist. Apart from that, as part of UN Habitat celebration today, they want us to look at poverty and increasing access by all would help us in going a long way in dealing with some of these challenges if we help to bolster families, poor families, and strengthen their capacity and capability to earn a living and to take care of their families. You can't tell a hungry man, don't steal banana when he can't find the means to even buy a banana. So we have to think about how we treat with our people on a whole and how we treat with our poor, particularly those in our urban spaces. Is Minister Charles ready now? Is Minister Charles ready? You think we should just ask Nicholas to do the, I don't know, do the at least the vote of thanks? We understand that Minister Charles, we start going counter to what is supposed to be done. But ask Nicholas to do the vote of thanks as we await Minister Charles. And when he comes on, he launches the program and we wrap up. All right, Nicholas, I'm going to ask you to just do the vote of thanks for us. We have kept persons long enough and people are hungry. Yeah. Nicholas, we're not hearing you, Nicholas.
You hearing me?
Yes.
All right. The Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., Minister of Housing, the Ministry of Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. Dr. Alwyn Hayes, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change. CGD Chief Technical Director, Mrs. Doreen Prendergast, and also UN Habitat Focal Point. Ms. Denise Antonio, Resident Representative of the United Nations Development Program for Belize, Jamaica, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, Bahamas, and Turks and Caicos Islands. Professor Dale Weber, Pro Vice Chancellor and Principal of the UA Mona Campus, also Chairman of the Climate Change Advisory Board. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the panel, distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have joined us on this platform and also on YouTube, good afternoon. It is an esteemed honor to deliver the vote of thanks for today's panel discussion under the theme, Accelerating Urban Action Towards a Carbon-Free.
Go ahead, Nicholas. Has he fallen out?
Minister of NUREC, Dr. Alwyn Hayes, Permanent Secretary, NUREC, and Chief Technical Director and UN Habitat Focal Point, Mrs. Doreen Prendergast. I would like to express a hearty thank you to everyone who was able to join us today. A special thanks to our distinguished panelists, Ms. Shernette Sampson, Mr. Anthony Mckenzie, Mr. Raymond Poyser, Mr. Darmat Williams, for sharing us the policies, programs, and projects of their respective organizations. It was very insightful and educational. It has been our honor to host this panel discussion to commemorate World Habitat Day 2021. We are thankful to all the participants and all those who made this occasion possible. These include our multifaceted moderator and Chief Technical Director, Mrs. Doreen Prendergast, Senior Director in the Housing Policy Research and Monitoring Branch, Ms. Paula Parks, for blessing our panel discussion with prayer, Dr. Alwyn Hayes for setting the tone for this discussion with welcome and reminding us of the importance of celebrating World Habitat Day, Professor Dale Weber and Mrs. Antonio for bringing remarks and reminding us that we need to readjust our focus and approach to carbon emissions, especially in our urban spaces. A special thanks to our Minister for his address, charging us to be more conscious about how we approach the environmental development. Mrs. Danny Clark and her team for setting up this platform and for the daily reminders. The executive management team in the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment and Climate Change for their kind assistance. The various secondary schools who took the time to join us this morning. A special thanks also to Mrs. Sansia Henry, Director of Housing Sector Monitoring, for her kind support. And to everyone who tuned in today, a big thank you for making this panel discussion a success. Please stay safe and adhere to the COVID-19 protocols. I now hand over to our moderator, Mrs. Prendergast, for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. We must commend the housing policy team, Ms. Paula Parks and our staff, and the communications team, Ms. Heather Campbell and Danny Clark and others for the tremendous work that they did behind the scenes and up front to get this Habitat Day program planned and executed. Thank you. Now, Minister is here. He has been, as we said, he has been juggling between cabinet and here. So he's here and we're going to ask him to launch the competition for secondary schools now.
All right. Hopefully you're hearing me loud and clear. You're hearing me, Mrs. Prendergast?
Yes, I am,
Minister. We're hearing you, Minister.
My apologies a while ago. I got caught up with making the submission to cabinet for us to have our delegation be approved for consideration to go to COP26. COP26 is going to be critical to the discussions we're having here today around World Habitat Day, because at COP26, we're going to advance a lot of the issues relating to climate action, a lot of the issues that are going to help us to raise awareness now, such as we are raising with the Murek World Habitat Day Secondary Schools competition in Jamaica, a project which is being launched under this year's theme, which is accelerating urban action towards a carbon-free world. Can you imagine what the world would be like if we are able to transition from this dependency on fossil fuels to the more sustainable activities and operations? We'll be looking at better air quality, longer lives, positive impact on our human health, and Nicholas James also on our environmental health. So the event that brings us together today makes me very happy, because it touches on issues that are critical to my ministry. And when you talk about creating a sustainable, eco-friendly world for us to live in, for us to operate in, for us to engage our youth in this process, this is what we have to do if we want to protect Jamaica for future generations. And again, there's so many times, Mrs. Prendergast, that we talk about these issues and it sounds like a broken record. It sounds like just phraseology. We have to get people to understand this is not just pretty words. It's not just phrases or catchphrases. We have to move towards sustainability, or else we won't have a planet. We won't be able to have any more World Habitat Day in years to come. So this launch of the Murek World Habitat Day Secondary School competition will call on secondary schools across the island to undertake and to submit a project in keeping with this year's World Habitat Day theme, accelerating urban action towards a carbon-free world. So we are looking forward to our students getting excited, energized, engaged, empowered, educated, and schools will be required now to conceptualize, implement, and present their projects to the Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, Environment, and Climate Change in June 2022. So you have some time to work on it, to refine it, to perfect it. The project is ideal for this period as it calls now on our youth, our young leaders. It calls you to action. Many times youngsters say to me, Minister, how can I get involved? What can I do? What can I do at my age, 12, 13, 14? This is what you can do. This will push you to become actively involved in designing the future of your country, of your community, of your school. All right, and this is where we all live. So the project brings to the forefront the reality that we are as much the contributors of change as we are the beneficiaries of the change that you're going to make. So I urge you, I want to encourage your principals and teachers, and I want to call on everyone, your parents and guardians, to get involved. And the call is for all persons, everyone across the communities, to get involved in ushering change. And we're going to provide more details, which will be published at the latest date, the end of October. Schools and winners will also be recognized subsequent to the judging process in July 2021. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the era of change. Mrs. Prendergast, friends, colleagues, panelists, everyone that has participated today, I want to thank you. I want to take the time now, great pleasure in launching officially, as I said, Murett's World Habitat Day Secondary Schools Competition. All the best to you. Thank you again. One love. You're on mute, Mrs. Prendergast.
Thank you very much, Minister. What a wonderful activity to wind down our World Habitat Day activities. The day has been wonderful, and I'm sure you would agree. From start to finish, it has been a beautiful day. We deliberated around the theme, accelerating urban action for a carbon-free world. And we heard persons advocating for us to manage the demand that is there on our urban spaces. We were also told that it will require deliberate action. And so we must be judicious in the way we develop our urban spaces. We were encouraged to strengthen our policies to build urban resilience and for us to engage in strategic partnerships, joined up government to ensure that there is connectivity and that we're all working together. We are encouraged also to be proactive. Don't operate as if it's business as usual. And of course, the minister challenges us to take the bold steps, make bold decisions, supported by empirical evidence in advocating that which we want to do. And of course, we are all encouraged to get involved in ushering in the change. And finally, just to say, I'm encouraging you all to go plant a tree. Go plant a tree on this World Habitat Day and make our communities, make our cities more livable. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. All.
Thank you, Mrs. Prendergast. Wonderful hosting. Thank you very much. Good job.
Thank you.